Okay, welcome everyone. I'm so excited to have you all here today. We're up for another great session. I hope you've learned a lot today, a lot of strategies, great updates on new projects. But this is when we really want to think about workflows, right? Workflows are always on our minds. We're also going to look really closely at the projspec project today. I'm really excited to have Martin Durant join us, who is on holiday but taking time out to tell us about this really important project. I really encourage everyone to please put your questions in the chat. We'll make sure we get those to our speaker. But we're excited that you're here today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over so we can learn all about this project. Thanks so much, Martin.
All right, thank you very much. So yes, we'll talk about projects and projspec, which is a project about projects, and I'm going to say the word project many times. And this is all in the context of PyData. So welcome everyone. And brief outline, we'll talk about what the user side is, why this exists, what are the things that we're hoping to achieve, and then what projspec brings, what it does, and a call to everybody to get involved, to share your needs, share your thoughts, and let's hope we can make something marvelous together. All right, so user story number one. This is very typical, and especially in the more sort of analyst, data scientist world, more than a dev story, but nevertheless, somebody gives you a project, and that might be a zip file containing a bunch of stuff. It might be a link to something on GitHub. It might be a shared link to Google Drive or whatever. It might even be horror, an email attachment such as a .py file or a notebook or whatever it is. So what happens next? Okay. You want to use this thing, somebody you know sent it to you for a very good reason. How do you figure out what to do? Maybe you have to read a README. You can probably figure out what language it's in. Maybe you can figure out what's the utility that makes this thing go. Maybe you find yourself digging. You're looking in the metadata to see what it needs. Maybe you're looking at doc strings, maybe you're looking at the command line utilities help function, whatever. There's a lot of things, but what you don't want to do is learn a whole new way of doing things just because somebody sent you a thing. You want to be able to make it do the thing. You don't want to have to learn all about the thing, right? So I put here, you want to go, not know, at least in the first instance. So that's user story one. Here's a second case. You work on a lot of things. You may have a bunch of local code directories. You might have notebooks scattered around. Maybe you have more shared things in different places. You want to figure out which is the one that you need to work on right now to do the thing that you're going to do. So the example here, which of these things can I use to make a Conda project anyway? That's a valid question. Wouldn't it be nice to have something that can search? You give it some set of criteria. It shows you, well, these are the two things that meet your criteria. You can figure out the one that you actually need to get your job done. So search is user story number two. Number three, this is like the higher level operative. You're actually in the IT department and you host a bunch of projects across your organization. You want to know, what do all these different projects do? Maybe simply you want to aggregate statistics. How many projects use pandas versus polars? That's a valid question. You might want to know that. Um, Perhaps you host a security platform serving packages, such as kind of thing that Anaconda does. And before banning a a package because it meets some CVE threshold, first you want to know what projects actually use that so that you can give people a heads up and they can migrate their code. So that's user story number three. You want more in detail knowledge across a whole range of projects from a lot of different users. So wouldn't it be nice if we had something that can introspect a project in some location, local or remote? You don't need to download it. You don't need to read the README file, the metadata, whatever. You can figure out what it is, how it works, what are the things that it can do. You can index all of these, keep a library, and so that you can find the particular project that does the thing you want. Basically, the user stories I just talked about, wouldn't it be nice if this was done? And of course, this is going to be project spec. But before we dive into that, I do want a smaller side, which is what is a project actually in this context? So I'm going to assert that a project in this context, it's a directory of files, and that those files do something, but you also have something in there that tells you what the rest of those files do. So you have metadata. This is pretty common these days. There's a bunch of tools for dealing, in particular in PyData, but also in other code-related fields. There are many ways to do this. Something like Poetry, like UV, like Pixie. These are Python-specific things for managing projects, but actually there's quite a lot of these things. And of course, a given directory might be multiple projects at once. So just because you've written a Python library, so a typical layout for something that you intend to publish to PyPy, it's probably also a Git repository. It's probably a whole bunch of other things. These are all project types. I call it one project, and it meets many different project specifications. When ideating over this, we came up with a non-exhaustive but rather long list of things that I consider projects, or the people around me at Anaconda consider to be projects. On the left hand here, we have project types. Many of these you might be familiar with. PyProject.toml, of course, is here, and there's lots of flavors of what it can do. You have, well, a simple init.py tells you what a directory can do. You might have other things. I mentioned these explicit managers here. Um, you might just have IDE config. There's a whole bunch of different things. In the middle, though, we have what are the types of things that each of these project specifications, what can it declare? What can it tell you about this directory? And there's a lot of things here. It can tell you about the environment that runs. It can tell you about data requirements. It can tell you about the models it uses. It can tell you where the code runs. It might even have stuff about versioning, documentation, a whole load of things. And finally, on the right-hand side, what are the things that this project can do? What can it make? Maybe it builds an artifact for installation. Maybe it builds a runtime. You get the idea. So projspec is a thing that concretizes these concepts. We have the idea of a project, the directory with different things that the different specs that this project can meet. It has what I call contents. So those are the things that the project declares about itself that are intrinsic to the project. And it has artifacts. Those are the things that the project can make or do. So what is projspec then? Projspec is a library. I'm saying the word library rather than project at this point. It includes a whole bunch of metadata specification parsers. So it understands all these different metadata formats, and it can tell you what type of project this is, what it contains, and what it can do. This gives you a single point of entry so that you can view all the details of some given directory that you didn't know about previously. And it tells you all of that information, lets you interact with the project. I should note this is not really for project creators. If you're building something, then let's say your favorite tool is UV that I already mentioned, you will actually be using UV, or you will be writing the UV metadata spec yourself, because it gives you the full flexibility. It gives you all of the detail that you actually need to be successful doing that. But then when you give your project to other people, or you share it, or you put it in a common org repository, then it can be indexed, searched, and it should integrate ideally with IDEs. So an example of what we had in mind here, this is Jupyter Lab, so super common IDE or code platform. On the right-hand side, we have something that's already real, a Jupyter FS spec. You can just go and get this. This allows you to browse directories and files in all the places that FSPec can see. So that's locally remote in various storage systems. Let's say you select some directory on here. It would be really nice if something popped up saying, hey, yes, this looks like a project, and here are all the details about your project. Oh, it's a Git repository, it's a Python library, it's a Rust library. This thing here on the left doesn't exist, or at least not in Jupyter Lab, but it's the kind of thing that you expect to see. All right, so I have a bunch of demos. I'm going to show them in a moment. There's the current state of projspec. It has a CLI. It has some hooks for Jupyter Notebooks. I have a super simple, shonky desktop app that I will show. That this is really demonstration of a demonstration to give you an idea of what should be possible. And for those that want to develop, there is the tutorial that I will show has a developer section that I won't have time for today. But if you go to the repo, to the projspec space on GitHub, then you'll see the kind of interactions that people have there at the moment. We have the top one, briefcase is one backend that we support. This is something you might have heard of from the Beware team that is largely hosted at Anaconda at the moment. Um, if you're writing a Beware project, then this will now show up in projspec as one of the possibilities, or at least it will when this is merged. But also there is a draft one for Django projects. There's one that has been merged here for read so you will find it interesting to see how these are implemented if you're a dev and you're interested in getting involved. Okay, so first, before the calls to action, let's have a look at the demos. Here's the CLI. This is pretty simple at the moment. Here's the help. So if you install projspec, you will have this. The first thing that you can actually do is you can look at some directory. For the purposes of the CLI and the tutorial, I'm only going to do local directories because it's much faster. I don't want to be doing remote things at the same time as I'm talking with you. But this could be any URL on, let's say, on S3 or on wherever you happen to know that there is code. You can do this. What's a summary of what I can find at this location? And this tells me in the root, this is actually the projspec repo. The projspec repo is quite special in that it meets lots of project specification types. This is on purpose so that we can use it for testing. It's a Conda project. You might not have even heard of some of these. It's a Git repo. It has JetBrains IDE information. It's a Pixie project. It's a poetry project. It's a Python library so that I can publish this. It has reader docs specification. It has UV environment. It also has VS Code. Yes, I've edited this using multiple IDEs. It has Docker information. It can make a Docker image, and from that Docker image, it can make a Docker runtime. That's quite a lot of things. Also, I can say look at the subdirectories, and you can see as well as the root, it also has a recipes directory that can build a Conda package using Conda or a Conda package using Rattler. Also, I have a source directory, and that contains the actual Python code, the Python package, and the thing that Python, the language itself, calls a package is in there. I can get information about any one of these, either the spec or the things that it can make. So I can read about things. There's just some, I'm not going to read this now. I can scan, what is the UV specific information in here? And oh, look, it has an environment spec using pip. The pip is like the pip stack, perhaps you could say. It has a lock file, which has, of course, very exact versions in here. That's also pip spec. It can make a lock file, which it already did. So it has done here. It can make a virtual env, which is not made at the moment. And it can make a wheel. I can also use projspec. Actually, let's just stick with UV for now. I can make a wheel using UV, using this kind of syntax. I could have used projspec to make a wheel with any of the things that can make a wheel, and there are a couple of them. But it did the thing, and I didn't need to know how UV works. I didn't need the UV specific syntax. I didn't know how to use the UV CLI to make that happen, which is not a big deal if you already use UV, but maybe you're a poetry person and you don't know how to use UV, so it can be handy. Okay, moving on to the in-code demo. This is, again, scanning the projspec directory and walk equals 2. This gives me a whole load of information here. I'm not going to tunnel too deep into this, you can say, oh, it's let's say, oh, it has a recipe directory that has a condo recipe in. I can look at what's the environment that you need. It has a build environment with some packages. It has a run environment with some packages. All the information is in here. Maybe this click, 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 click is not the most convenient way, but at least the information is there for now. You can also use tab completion to go down into this very hierarchical data structure. Um, because it's a Python library, one of the artifacts it has is a wheel, and this is the command that you would use to make Python itself build a wheel. Um, I can ask, is this also a UV project? If that's a, if it's a condition that I want, if I want to programmatically do something with this, I can look at all the artifacts I can build. There's quite a few of them from here. I can look at which of these are wheels. I can build a wheel. We already saw this. I can build it with poetry. I can build it with UV. I can build it with Python. I can get JSON friendly versions of all of these. And I can also, again, make it again, just like I did from the command line. Okay, there's the rest of this tutorial is the dev part that we don't have time to go into today. So please go and have a look at that if you have the chance. But another application, if you like, that I would like to demonstrate here. This is not a complete application, but Qt is, or at least used to be, my thing. So I find it very easy to knock together a desktop application in here. We have a file browser on the left, where you can see in the code directory, we have a few things here that have already been scanned as projspec projects. And I have the library down here. So these are all the things these are persisted. So I don't have to scan them again. I can click on these and their details. Now, this is the same HTML-ish clicky clicky interface here. But these details just show up. I don't need to scan them again. But I can go to some directory that I haven't scanned yet. So if I go to projspec, I'm going to scan that. It adds it onto the library. And here are all these different project types in there. I can also go to the subdirectories. So the recipe has the condo recipe and the rattler recipe in there also. And you'll notice that I have some of these are remote. So for example, I can go to this Google Drive copy of the intake repo, and that's a Python library that contains intake. It's also a read the doc specification. And you can see that I need some credentials to be able to read from my own Google Drive, but maybe if you're an organization, that's a natural place for you to put things and have credentials already. I could also do the search thing here. So I can say, of all of the things that I've scanned already, I want to know which of them are, let's say, reader.doc compatible. And you can see some of them are. Now, this app gives you a flavor. I don't expect people to actually use this directly, but I do expect something like this to be integrated into PyCharm, into VS Code, into Jupyter, as I had the mock-up already. So this gives you a flavor of the kind of add-ins that you would have. This would very nicely integrate with the space where you can actually edit your code and do debugging and whatever else you're doing. All right. So the reason that I'm bringing this to PyData Global is that projspec as it stands is kind of useful. It already implements a decent number of project types that are of interest to the PyData community, but there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of metadata types. There's a lot of things that can happen inside a project. And all of these different metadata types that are out there need parsers, and those had better be written by people who understand those specs better than I do. It's the scope of where exactly the edges of PyData is, where projspec itself should stop, is blurry. Like, it's not obvious that a Docker file, you find them. You find Docker files in PyData projects all the time. Does it belong in the PyData sphere? Yeah, probably. But there are other things that we can quibble about, whether they really belong or not. And the people who introspect those things and surface the definitions of, hey, what is this project actually about? What can this project actually do? I would rather it wasn't me. I would rather it was the people who actually understand those things. So, what can you do? First of all, I want feedback on the idea. I want people to use this to comment on the API. Does this feel familiar? Is this something that you can get used to? Secondly, please just request project types. Hey, I'm a practitioner. This is the kind of workflow that I do. How does this fit into projspec? That is absolutely something I want to hear. Um, and what features you hope projspec will bring you in the future. Second, obviously, I want people to actually come with pull requests and please contribute. Documentation is also, which is not really mentioned here, but documentation of how to think about these things, how to use these things is always secondary in every code project I've ever been involved in, which is a shame. Um, but as I really just mentioned, this will work well if it's crowdsourced, if the parsers themselves are not complicated, but the domain-specific knowledge of what these different things do is. So I need all of you to get involved, either in just conversation or actually contributing code. And then finally, I notice I've gone a little bit fast, so we will have time for questions here. These are like, you could view this as a very loose roadmap, perhaps. I showed you the mock-ups of how the UI could be. I showed you the idea that I would like this to appear alongside your file browser and other information inside your IDE. Ideally, you should be able to interact with it. They're not just like, here's your files, here's some static information. Okay, now you can maybe edit. But it would be better if that was an interactive workflow that you can really integrate your projects of all the different types into your IDE. That's what I'm hoping to achieve in the end, both for introspection, for actions, and for search, locally and remote. That's the real dream here. The second part, we haven't really made any concrete plans around this, but if you have project types, then maybe you can convert between different project types. For example, I have some Python library that can run. Maybe it's a CLI, maybe it does something interactive as a server. Oh, perhaps I can run this as a PyScript app. That's definitely in scope. It's the kind of thing that you should be able to do, but it's not quite simple because PyScript has its own way of thinking about things, as it has a bunch of things that it can and can't do. And the details of that conversion need to live somewhere. And projspec, because it cares about all of these different input project types and it also knows a little bit at least about PyScript, would be an obvious place to do that kind of conversion. Similarly, if you want to bundle your Python library, you want to deploy to somewhere, that's something that maybe projspec can have an opinion about. I've mentioned Android here. I already mentioned previously Beware and Briefcase. That's I think, the way to bundle things for Android. So if you wanted some s- automated or at least streamlining process for how to do this deployment, then maybe ProjSpec would be the place that happens. And then again, the very similar idea. I want to productionize. I want to maybe make a Docker image where that does the same thing that I could run locally. That's the kind of thing that maybe ProjSpec can care about. Some of the tools that I mentioned already think about this. I think it's Pixie that can make you a Docker image out of your project. I don't actually know how that works, but some people listening might. But it raises a lot of questions. So, your project dependencies, we're mostly talking about packages here, but maybe actually system dependencies, maybe hardware dependencies are a thing that we care about. Maybe we're declaring more than runtime, more than command line. Maybe we're declaring data sets. Maybe we're declaring models. How do these things fit in. I think it's super interesting, and a conversation around this should just run and run. And yeah, we'll bring together something interesting. And here's a couple of links, and now we can have questions. So let me see. I need to look if there are any questions. No, not yet. I will wait for people. Please feel free.
Thanks, Martin. I'm just going to put a note here in the chat for everyone as well. Just a reminder that we can also continue discussions around these sessions also in Discord, and there's a reception area with the conference as well where you can continue those. If you're like me, sometimes you get your best questions for a presenter after the session. That always seems to happen to me. So if you don't have a question ready today, please connect with Martin after this. This has been a really great presentation, and I know we're all excited to learn more about this project. Okay, we'll hold on here for just a couple more seconds just to see if anyone has any questions. Anyone feel free to pop any questions or even just any comments that you have. We're glad that you're here today. I know it's been a really probably busy number of sessions that everyone's presenting. Okay, I haven't seen any questions yet, but I know that I've given everyone kind of the details to connect with Martin. I hope that you'll continue to reach out. Wonderful community here of maintainers and everyone providing support to each other with these projects. So I hope that you will reach out to Martin with your questions later and to connect and continue the conversation. Martin, thank you so much for presenting today. Thanks for everything. Just a reminder to everyone that the recording will be available shortly after the presentations today. Thanks, Martin.